For a general discussion, but if you have any clarification question at the moment, you can just jump in and ask. Otherwise, we will move to the next presentation. Stefan, do you have a question?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Good, thank you.
When you mentioned support to start and support for conversion, is it financial support only, or will it also be other forms of support? My first question, I have another one.
For conversion, yeah, it was also to have other support, because at the moment there is support for conversion. So it was financial support for maintenance, and for the conversion to also maybe have some extra cooperation measures. For instance, connecting farmers in conversion with organic farmers who have been doing organic for more time to foster exchange of practices.
In that case, you only refer to organic agriculture and not to agroecology, do you?
Yeah, we had I had one specific point on the slide referring to organic, so I thought the question was on organic specific.
It was in actions to address barriers, and you at field at farm level you mentioned support and so on.
Yeah.
But which to me was wider than what exists for conversion to organic or maintenance in organics.
Yeah, we had this point about organic, and then at farm level, the idea is also to have more trainings for farmers and advisor about innovative measures, and then to have specific support for agroecological practices, even if the farmers do not get organic directly. So to set up some support for the farmers that would implement some agroecological practices, but without getting to the organic certification in the first stage. Did I answer your question?
More or less. But my next question was about the fact that you said that most of the farmers already belong to CUMAs, cooperatives. I don't see it as a lever or a positive factor which could help whether at territorial level or in strengthening connection among farmers. So in another way, what is the cooperative effect that you've seen that would be a lever to go over barriers and obstacles that you mentioned?
Mm-hmm. There are two aspects. First of all, one is related to the support that a CUMA can get for collective investment. In Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes region, there are now requirements for a CUMA to get support, to get an investment support, and one of the criteria is that they should be at the level of the cooperative reflection, a strategic reflection, a strategic diagnosis, and they are also farmers being part of the network are also not forced to, but really encouraged to follow some trainings about agroecology. So these, let's say, policy requirements tend to lead the farmers being part of CUMAs to have strategic thinking which contains some environmental issue, and it is seen as a requirement that can bring people to have a reflection about agroecology. And the second aspect is that next to sharing machinery, there are different actions being implemented in the QMAS, such as going to farm demonstration, exchanging within the group about the practices that one or another farmer has, and this is a way to get farmer to maybe test practices that he would not have tested if he had not been part of the QMA.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Stefan, for the question and Audrey. Stefan, please. Yeah, good.
I'm speaking. May I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. The kind of, let's say, training system you advocate or you propose, you call it modernized, which is somehow simplified with the two Ds. That's a peach tree in 2 dimensions, if I'm right.
Yeah.
Which is, to me, not really agro-ecologically based. Would you agree with that?
I wouldn't agree, because in the beginning, I was quite reluctant to accept that. But talking with the local people, they explained to me that that would create a lot of, let's say, economize a lot of energy and water. And also it could be quite important in terms of reducing pesticides use. The problem that I recognized, and I still haven't, let's say, solved myself, to be honest, is that it changes totally the whole idea of an orchard.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something that I'm not convinced, let's say. But don't forget that this is not my proposal.
No.
It's yeah. But I still have this doubt, to be honest, and I haven't been persuaded by.
But that
local
would be
people.
interesting to measure, to evaluate the impacts, and especially environmental impacts. But to me, there are some arguments maybe around what you mentioned about different ways of pruning would be interesting, because when they prune in green, you have more light and more wind or aeration within the canopy and so on. To me, that would be more the basis of an agro-ecological orchard. And because the one you showed that we partly have in France and in different countries, and for apple trees as well, highly mechanized with labor productivity in mind, doesn't always lead to a reduction in the use of pesticides and in inputs generally. And to me, that's another way to design an orchard. And that might be a more general discussion, to think whether we have a stepwise approach and taking things as they are and dynamics as they occur, or if we also try to identify, even encourage, let's say, training systems and orchards that would be slightly different, giving more room to biodiversity, even having more biodiverse orchards. I don't see any much edges, ecological infrastructures and all of that. That's another approach.
Yep.
So it's not to criticize this model, which has its own justification, but I wouldn't call it deep agro-ecological.
I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you. The problem I find in this kind of thing is that it's difficult to persuade people in the area that they have to reach out for a different way of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
They have this thing in mind that the main thing is that they want to use, let's say, the whole system in order to increase their sustainability, mainly in terms of income and let's say the income. And the green part of this, they see it only as something that they have to do because they can't increase their profitability without it anymore. And you're right about that. But this is something that it's not for me to
just one
judge.
minor question, but which might.
The other thing that you said that this is exactly the argument that it's much more sun, much more light, and much more flow of
air, and eventually
air.
those diseases and pests.
Yeah.
The minor question is about, you mentioned the selection of varieties, resistant varieties. How do they organize? Do they depend on external breeders, or do themselves have the ability to do something on their own in terms of selection?
They totally depend on external ones, and this is the other thing, is that since the rapid expansion of trees, of tree growing there, in fact, they have been depending a lot of new varieties that were coming, and actually they were proposed by people without thinking anything but the production, and not only the quantity, not the quality. This was the first one. And the funny thing about that is that they found out that by doing that, they had a very big problem, because they were always buying medium harvest, let's say, varieties. And that means that they couldn't be able to provide farmers, the industry, with inputs for the whole period. They all had the peak at 2 months and nothing more than that. So that was a big problem they created, because of they were selecting the wrong type of varieties. In looking at the short-term profit, they created a big problem in the whole area.
Okay, thank you, George, and thank you, Stefan, for your very pertinent question. Thanks, Andrea, for the presentation. We have a few minutes for maybe some questions on this perspective from Italy, where we have this biodistrict approach that seems really coherent with the agroecological transition, since it brings several elements together at landscape scale level, involving several actors and the networks of people that share new practices and also co-produce knowledge. So there is some question on the Italian case. Otherwise, you can also jump in with general question regarding the three presentations. Stefan, you want to add something?
Yes, to me, well, the last point mentioned by Andrea is a very serious one. When you mention crop diversification, to me it's about shifting from specialization, I would say, which is really critical in this domain regarding viticulture or fruit production, because we kind of specialized farms, sometimes in areas which are not ideal for that, but it's really difficult. I think there's a specific challenge to think about despecializing, getting rid of specialized approach and getting rid of pesticides as well.
Yes.
But what I see in what you presented as a whole, that's really as George said before, I think we take in things as they are today, with dynamics, with initiatives, with contexts which are different, but let's say still with a stepwise approach and looking at more efficiency, I would say, in production. And we're still guided with this paradigm, I would say, of better efficiency and reducing inputs and improving or the impact or lessening the impact we have on the environment. And I think the real another challenge is really to get into a new perspective, whether at field level with other models. And I know it's very difficult to redesign trees because you kind of inherit from functioning of the trees, of the farmers themselves, of the extension and buyers, and all the whole chain, I would say, is organized in a very specialized and perhaps efficient way. And I think that the specific challenge is to shift from this silo approach and try to think other options.
Yes.
Talked about that just to finish. We really wondered whether to make orchards, let's say, maybe vineyards more agro-ecological, should we start with what exists or think about designing new systems with other trading systems with more diversity at field and farm level? And this challenge, I just was wondering whether you also face it, or can you see it in other places as well? Maybe the places where you've been working in are more, in this stepwise approach. Or do you see any other avenues for exploring new ways to produce, of de-specializing, of thinking?
No. Well, Stefan, thank you very much for your question. I think that the stepwise approach is more reasonable for an area where the success of the vineyard is so high in the profitability that in the past, in the last 3 or 2-3 decades, there is an increase in specialization. Roughly, we have 10,000 hectares of 30,000 hectares of farmland in this area. But there is no increasing in the area of vineyard. There is only an increase in specialization at farm level. And reverse this trend could be quite important. And reverse the trend in farmland abandonment could be another big challenge. So yes, in a stepwise approach, I think that if in Chianti they can have in the few years reverse this trend, could be a positive effect. After that, we can also go beyond using different agro-ecological practice for the vineyard. For example, inter-row green cover could have a positive effect on the biodiversity, and also maybe reducing the effect of pesticide, and of course the use of organic method is quite important as a contribution on it. But if you want to reverse this, I think you have to rebalance the profitability of vineyard on one side and olive groves and other products on the other. Otherwise, there is no way to convince the farmer that there is another kind of agriculture to be made, even in Chianti, where wine, of course, is the king of the product. But and here, I think the challenge, we move the challenge from the farm level to the territorial level, from the agricultural side to the food side, to the food chain. And so there is the help of other actors to increase the market opportunity for this other product.
Thank you, Andrea. I think